Welcome back, my friends. Currently, we're on day 225 of Russia's disastrous invasion of Ukraine, and today I have an incredible video to share with you of Russian soldiers surrendering to Ukrainian soldiers in the Kherson region. Scenes like this are becoming increasingly more common as Russia decided to mass mobilize 300,000 Russian men against their will to go fight in Ukraine. So here's the clip, and it's 5 minutes and 45 seconds long. I'm only going to share with you about 90 seconds, but I'll link it down below. And inside this BMP-2, there are 3 Russian soldiers who coordinated where and when to surrender to Ukrainian forces. The BMP-2 is an amphibious infantry fighting vehicle, and they wanted the cash reward for surrendering with the equipment. This is what Ukraine is offering Russian soldiers if they're willing to surrender with their equipment. So let's watch about 90 seconds of this clip. So the Ukrainian forces are going to close in on the BMP and search it to make sure it's safe. They're going to pat down the Russian soldiers and make sure they're not concealing any weapons, but everyone in this incident is safe. No one was harmed, and the lives of these 3 Russian soldiers were saved because they were able to and willing to surrender to Ukrainian forces. And more than likely, they're going to get a pardon and be given maybe favorable treatment while they wait out for this war to end. And it was back in April that the Ukrainian parliament signed into law offering cash rewards for Russian soldiers willing to surrender equipment. So we have $1 million for a plane, $500,000 for a helicopter, $100,000 for a tank. This is from April, so the cash rewards might have increased, but $250,000 split 3 ways plus Ukrainian citizenship, that's still a pretty good deal. Here's another clip of a Russian soldier who chose to surrender to Ukrainian forces. And before I show this clip, I want to give the disclaimer that I don't believe these Russian soldiers are being forced to film these videos. I think they're being offered incentives to film these videos. That if you are willing to share your story of how you decided to surrender to Ukraine, we'll offer you a pardon, maybe a cash reward, Ukrainian citizenship, will protect you. So here is a Russian soldier who was part of the mass mobilization. He was mobilized on the 21st, and within 4 days, he was on the front lines in Ukraine. So he made it to Ukraine on September 25th, and then it took him about a week to figure out how to safely surrender to the Ukrainians. This is his story.
Меня зовут Куликов Михаил Алексеевич. Родился 20 апреля 1994 в городе Орск, Оренбургской области. 21 сентября этого текущего года получил повестку. Медкомиссия, отправка в часть 25 числа. Я уже был в Украине. Перед тем, как отправиться на медкомиссию, гуглил, как можно сдаться в плен, чтобы не оказаться убитым. Нашел в Телеграме канал «Хочу жить». Это государственная программа Украины. Там нашел номер, позвонил по нему. Мне объяснили, что, как нужно сделать, куда выйти, что сказать, чтобы меня не убили.
Even though this man was mobilized against his will by his government, he is still a POW, a prisoner of war, and it's really important that these POWs are treated well by the Ukrainians to encourage more people to call these hotline numbers to coordinate a safe way for them to surrender and get out of this war. And why might all these Russian men want to get out of this conflict? And it's because right now the Ukrainian military is kicking ass. They continue to break through Russian lines in the south on the north bank of the Dnipro River. And they're also continuing to advance east out of the Kharkiv region into the Luhansk Oblast. So a week or two after Putin decided to annex these 4 Ukrainian territories, Russia is losing territory in all 4 of them. The Russian military cannot stop the Ukrainian advance. So when we zoom in on the north front, it looks like they've gotten well past this river. They're pushing towards this road that goes to Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. The main targets are Kremenia and Svatov. Once they get control of this road, this is going to be very bad news for the Russian forces in the rest of the Luhansk Oblast, as the only other rail lines supplying them more than likely will be destroyed by HIMARS. When we switch over to the southern front, this is absolutely incredible. We can go back on the map just 6 days. And this is what the front line looked like on October 1st. And you can see that the progress that the Ukrainians have made in just 6 days is absolutely unbelievable. And for people who support Russia in this war, they can make all kinds of excuses about the Kharkiv region or the Ukrainian counteroffensive in the Kharkiv region, stating that those were reservists, they weren't properly supported, it was a strategic withdrawal. But there's no excuse for the Russian military being defeated in this region when this is their professional military. This is their best equipped, best trained soldiers planning to repel this Ukrainian counteroffensive for months, and they're still, at the current time, getting their asses kicked. So at the rate the Ukrainians are advancing, I think they're going to have full control of the north bank of this river within the coming weeks. The city of Kherson might be a little bit more difficult to kick the Russians out if they choose to stand and fight. Urban combat going building to building is very costly for a military to attack into. Let's now pivot and talk about all the chaos and dysfunction as a result of Russian mobilization. Lots of Russian men holding on to their smartphones with cameras, still having internet access. They're trying to get their stories out. The location of this men is unknown, but they're recording a video to the public saying they were abandoned by their leadership. They've been sleeping outside in the cold for days. They're all getting sick. The weapons that they were given were not registered to anyone. There's no accountability of their stockpiles. To eat, they're having to buy their own food with their own money, and there are mentally and physically unhealthy people among them. So let's watch about 1 minute of this clip.
Один автомат не прописан в нашем военнике.
Это статья 222 Уголовного кодекса Российской Федерации.
Отношение скотское от офицеров.
Мы никому не нужны. Подготовки ровным счетом 0.
Мы жрем то, что сами себе покупаем,
Мы потратили охеренное количество бабок.
чтобы просто поесть.
Это же не говоря об амуниции.
Просто купи себе бронежилет.
Вот, нам выдали боевой комплект, то есть боевые патроны.
Были найдены в части.
Просто найдены на улице в части. Птички неуравновешенных. Половина.
Никакой комиссии не было нигде, блядь.
Здесь психически неуравновешенные. По очереди. Первый день, как только мы приехали сюда, мы жили на улице. И во второй день. 90% людей...
90% of the people here are currently unwell. Here's another clip from Yellen, the city of Yellen, and these Russian men were mobilized, and their unit doesn't have uniforms or weapon to equip them, and the only training they're receiving is how to march in the yard.
Началась мобилизация, привезли учебки, и народ тупо учат маршировать. Ни автоматов, ничего не одели, не обули. Но там половина с похмелья, они вообще старые, они в зоне риска, и тут скорая должна дежурить, блядь. Господи, чудные дела, а? Что творится-то?
You can see that the only equipment these men have are what they brought with them, and it just looks like camping gear, floor mats and sleeping bags. The military can't supply any equipment to these men. And for the men lucky enough to get equipment, this is the kind of quality. Here is another review of a Russian helmet.
На шолом російського вояки. Показую. Ну, взагалі виглядає як спецура, м'якенька голова, нове кріплення, пластмаса, швидкозйом. Ну, то воїн. З чого ж він складається? Тако розкривається. Що це? Баняки якісь? І все. А де ж шльом? Де ж...
This thin sheet of plate metal isn't going to stop a piece of shrapnel from going into your skull at high speeds. This helmet is a joke. And just when you think it can't get any more embarrassing for the Russian military, they're starting to train their soldiers how to wrap their feet in cloth because they don't have socks to supply them. The Russian military doesn't have enough socks for all their soldiers. So here is a clip of a Russian soldier reacting to the fact that he has to wrap his feet in cloth because he doesn't have socks.
Сука, как эти ебаные, блядь, портянки одеть, 21 век, сука. А мы, блядь, в чем деды воевали? Сука, ебаный шаг. Блядь, ну нахуй.
Absolutely embarrassing. The Russian military has also apparently misplaced 1.5 million winter uniforms that were supposed to be sent for the use of the Russian forces in Ukraine. The biggest downfall of the Russian military is easily corruption, as obviously what happened here is that the money appropriated to buy these 1.5 million winter uniforms for their soldiers, all that money was stolen, the uniforms were never produced, and they only existed on paper. So they're very surprised when they go to, distribute them, and these uniforms don't exist. Here might be my favorite example this week of the dysfunction of the Russian military. Here's a Russian officer strategizing his war plans, and you can see on the table he's using an Avengers collector's pencil, meaning he got his pencil from a Ukrainian home. He stole it from the house, probably from a child's bedroom. This is the state, this is the quality of the Russian military, where they were sent into a war zone, and by design, they were told you have to supply yourselves. If you need something like socks or pencils, you have to steal it from the Ukrainians. Food, absolutely astonishing. And we actually have people in the Russian government finally speaking up about how bad it is. A State Duma deputy asks the defense ministry to stop lying about the war. Andrei Kartopalov, head of the State Duma Committee on Defense, criticized the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation for not reporting the whole truth about ministry action in Ukraine. And he cites an example of Soviet propaganda in World War II as the Germans were approaching Moscow, and yet the Moscow papers were saying everything in the war was going fine. What's happening here is we're getting to the point where people within Russia are realizing this war is lost for them, so they're already starting to point fingers and shift blame so that when purges inevitably come, they're the ones who spoke out first about the failings of other people, the failings of other agencies. And for Russia, it's impossible to fix a problem until you admit you have a problem. I don't even know how you win a war unless you acknowledge that you're fighting a war, which is something 7 or 8 months into this conflict, Russia still really hasn't done. So with the failings of the Russian ground forces in Ukraine, Russia's only trump card, the only thing that keeps the West from intervening, is their nuclear stockpile. Putin, in all of his public speeches now, frequently will reference his nuclear arsenal because it's the only thing that Russia has that is deterring the West from doing more. And I realize that there's going to be lots of articles and reports in the media. I was a former nuclear and missile operations officer in the Air Force, and on my channel, I'm going to continue to make the argument that I don't think Russia will use a nuclear weapon because it doesn't help them achieve their military objectives. Things can always get worse for the Russian military should they cross that red line and use a nuclear weapon. And when is the moment to panic? In the immediate term. And this will occur once there's a leak to the media of Western militaries changing their defense posture. So the United States military has its own states of readiness, and they will act on credible intelligence that they receive from within Russia. So at this point, I'm convinced that a lot of people in senior military leadership and a lot of people in the Kremlin are leaking information to Western intelligence because when this war is over, they want a pardon for war crimes. So there's already people within Putin's government, within the Russian military, collaborating with the West to cover their own asses once Russia loses this war. And as soon as Russia actually starts taking the steps necessary to deploy a tactical nuke in Ukraine, that information is going to be immediately leaked to Western intelligence, and then the United States military and NATO will act on it. And once that occurs, I don't think you can keep that a secret for very long. It will get leaked to the press, and that's when you'll know that something serious is about to happen. In the meantime, Western militaries, the Western allies, are going to continue supplying aid and assistance to Ukraine. The United States just announced their next security assistance package worth $625 million. I think there was some confusion in the last security assistance package about these 16 HIMARS systems. They're being ordered brand new from Lockheed Martin and will be delivered to Ukraine eventually, maybe 6 months or a year from now. So to maybe backtrack on that criticism, in this security assistance package, the United States announced 4 more HIMARS launchers from their existing stockpile. This brings the total amount of launchers for Ukraine up to 20. In addition, they have the M270 and the Mars 2. Lots of other great stuff in this security assistance package. In addition, on October 1st, the Lend-Lease Act officially went into effect. We haven't gotten any reports what specifically is being provided to Ukraine now under that provision. The EU is also doing their parts, announcing an 8th round of sanctions against Russia. There are always more Russian individuals and Russian entities and companies around the world doing business with Russia that you can punish and sanction to further hasten the demise of the Russian economy. And here is potentially some bad news helping the Russian economy as OPEC agrees to cuts in production. Over the last 2 or 3 days, the price of oil went back up in response to OPEC's announcement. You can see that the trend, the price of oil was going down ever since early June. And there's a couple different ways to look at this, a couple different ways to interpret this. One, if you're outside of OPEC, this doesn't affect your production. Oil producers in North America, South America, or Africa, they can do their own thing. They might be increasing. Russia is for sure boosting their oil output as they're trying to desperately make as much money as they can from their exports. They're already running a monthly budget deficit, which is not good for their economy considering they can't access international bond markets. They can't afford to run deficits. So how Russia is doing this, they're starting to manipulate their currency as far as maybe printing money to pay their bills. This will cause their economy to spiral out of control fast. But when it comes to Saudi Arabia and OPEC, Putin and the Prince fears in the West as Russia and Saudi Arabia deepen ties. I don't think anyone really likes the government of Saudi Arabia. When you talk about Middle East politics, there's only 2 regional powers, Iran and Saudi Arabia. For the last 40 years, the United States has chosen to favor Saudi Arabia because they view Iran as worst. But Iran is already an ally of Russia. So the politics here gets pretty murky. Mohammed bin Salman is a murderer. He's not a good guy. Saudi Arabia is not a good government. So how to interpret this? One, it might be nothing. I think Saudi Arabia and OPEC probably employ the world's best economists, and people have been doing analysis and projections based on future forecasts, and they decided to cut production because they see global demand falling faster than expected. And this is a response to central banks around the world raising interest rates, making it more difficult to borrow money. Europe is going into recession, Asia's in recession, North America's in recession. So here is an article from Yahoo Finance saying that it's more likely that we're going to see oil go to $65 a barrel before it goes back up to $100 a barrel, even with OPEC's oil production. So when we look at the chart, oil was at $65 a barrel just in November of last year, and even with OPEC's production cuts, as long as global demand for energy continues to fall as economies slow down, the price of oil will continue to collapse, and this is still going to hurt Russia in the near term. Let's now wrap up this video with a couple clips of Ukrainian heroes. And the first one is of Ukrainian soldiers in a recently liberated town returning to this family a washing machine. Their washing machine had been stolen by Russian soldiers, and here is the reaction of the family getting a washing machine back.
Тетяно, це вам. За вашу доброту і любов, яку ви нам надали, ми вам
Це дуже дорогий подарок. Це сильно дорогий подарок.
It's little things like this, just having a washing machine that was stolen returned to you, that allows you to feel a bit more normal with your life, if that's even possible in an active war zone. The final clip is of a Ukrainian defender, probably returning home on leave after being on the front lines for months. And here is the reaction of man's best friends. This is his dog, seeing him for the first time in months.
Привет!
Боже, я не знаю, що робити. Що робити?
Тогда что попробую из какой?
That's all for this video. Glory to the heroes, glory to Ukraine. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support my channel. Comments or questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, take care, be safe.